For activity H, we are going to practice looking at parenthetical elements and deciding if they are restrictive or non-restrictive. So this is just another way that phrases and clauses can be put into sentences. Sometimes they're necessary and sometimes they're not. And the way that you'll figure it out is if they're necessary, they change the meaning of the sentence. So we're going to look at some definitions and then we'll look at some examples. So a restrictive parenthetical element provides necessary information. That means it needs to be there. If it's removed, this clause, then the meaning of the sentence is going to change. It's necessary for understanding the sentence and understanding it in the way that it was written, giving the information that the author or the writer feels that you need to know is necessary. It is not separated from the rest of the sentence, so it will blend in. There will not be any special punctuation mark that would cause it to be eliminated from the sentence. Versus a non-restrictive parenthetical element, this does not provide necessary information. If you remove this clause, and sometimes it's a phrase, the meaning of the sentence is not going to change. It's going to be exactly the same. You might just have a little less information or knowledge from it, but the meaning itself is exactly the same. And these elements are not necessary for understanding the sentence. And to show them, they are separated from the rest of the sentence. A lot like transitions at the beginning of a sentence, we put a comma there, because if you put the comma there, it indicates that you can remove that part of the sentence. When we see these parenthetical elements, and sometimes they're commas, we'll look at a couple of other punctuation marks that will be used, but when you see them, these commas or these punctuation marks, the parts that are in between them can be removed from the sentence. So let's look at an example. It says, children who eat vegetables are likely to be healthy. The parenthetical element here is who eat vegetables. If I were to take that out of the sentence, my sentence would read, children are likely to be healthy. And that changes the meaning of the sentence. It's not just children are likely to be healthy. It's conditional upon the fact of them eating vegetables. So the meaning is critical, and that clause is necessary or restrictive. So a non-restrictive example, Kaylee, who just graduated from high school, is an accomplished figure skater. You see the commas here around this clause. If I take it out, it would say Kaylee is an accomplished figure skater. And she is. Whether or not we know that she graduated from high school, she's still an accomplished figure skater. So the meaning of the sentence does not change. So some different punctuation marks that we could use, first of all, is a comma. A comma is used before and after clauses that are closely related. They might give description or clarification or detail to the main idea. And they look like this. Now we keep saying clause, but sometimes phrases can act as parenthetical elements as well. But because we're talking specifically about dependent clauses in this unit, we're just going to stick to that terminology. All right, parentheses. Parentheses are used to enclose comments that turn away from the main idea of the sentence. So that clause might be just an afterthought. It's a side comment. It might explain a circumstance that's happening, but it's not necessary. And they look like that. We don't want to confuse those with quotation marks. Parentheses are very different. Okay, so when your comment is moving away from the main idea, then we use parentheses. And then dashes separate comments that a comment that is loosely related to the main idea. They are used when interrupting or contrasting or giving an afterthought. And so we kind of think of them as being the dramatic punctuation mark. We want to use them sparingly. Don't use them too much. Okay, and they look like that. They look like, too, when you're typing, you would use two of that punctuation mark. So dashes are used between phrases and clauses, whereas one, you'll see that this one's a little bit shorter. That would be just like one of these. Those are called hyphens, and they're used between words, so between prefixes and compound words. But dashes we would put between phrases and clauses, like groupings of words. So let's look at some different types. We've got the appositive. We've talked about appositives. An appositive is a phrase that acts like a noun. It has a noun in it with its own modifiers, and it clarifies or renames the noun that it follows in the sentence. Macy, comma, my sister, comma, loves musical. It's non-restrictive because I could take it out of the sentence and just say Macy loves musicals. The sentence meaning is the same, but with the appositive, then I know that who Macy is. I've got a little more context to that. This is an example of a phrase. A relative clause is a dependent clause. It starts with who, whom, which, or that, and these are subordinating conjunctions that we've talked about and worked on recognizing. But when we see them specifically acting this way, then they're called relative clauses. There are nominative clauses. These are called relative clauses. They act like adjectives, and they begin with who, whom, which, or that. My teacher, who eats lunch at noon each day, was not available for discussion. This is a non-restrictive clause because I could take it out and say my teacher was not available for discussion. But with the clause in there, I've got a little bit more description. Now it looks a lot like an appositive because it is describing the teacher. The difference is that an appositive renames it. It has a noun in it, whereas a relative clause is an actual dependent clause. There's no noun within there. Then we could have prepositional phrases. Now we typically say prepositional phrases at the beginning need commas always. There are some times in the middle of a sentence, if it's not necessary, if it doesn't change the meaning of a sentence, that we could take the comma out. Or we don't need to put commas, but we could. There are many times when you're writing that we're not going to be too picky about how you're punctuating these prepositional phrases in the middle of a sentence, but we very, very much will be when they're at the beginning. So, phrase that acts like an adjective or an adverb and modifies other words in a sentence. So the mouse is describing as an adverb when, after hours of deliberation, it ate the piece of cheese. It's non-restrictive because I could take it out and the sentence still means the same. The mouse ate the piece of cheese. This just gives a little bit more information about when it's doing that. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit of practice. Okay, I'm going to do the first example with you. Then you can pause the screencast and do the next 4. And then we're going to do the same thing here and the same thing here. Hold on one second. Your first task says, highlight the non-restrictive parenthetical elements in the sentences below. These are elements that could be taken out of the sentence. If you need to, you can go back to slide 2 for an example of what kind of punctuation marks you're looking for. But in this one, it looks pretty obvious to me. It says, number 1, I am looking forward to taking a cruise on a brand new ship this time with my family. I see parentheses here. So this is my non-restrictive clause. I could take it out of the sentence and say, I'm looking forward to taking a cruise with my family. But now I've got a little bit of unnecessary information. It's kind of straying away from the main idea, but it's just giving a little bit of interruption or information to the sentence. So you're going to go do 2, 3, 4, and 5, pause the screencast, and then go continue on to the next slide. Task number 2 takes this to the next level. It says identify the parenthetical element by highlighting them and putting commas, parentheses, or dashes around them. So now you have to find the parenthetical element. So number 1, goldfish can be many different colors, various combinations of white, yellow, orange, red, brown, and black, and use special cells called chromatophores to produce pigments in response to light. So when I read that, I might need to read that a couple of times to figure out what part of that sentence can I take out. Now I'm also going to say I see a lot of commas in here. So I might use a different punctuation mark. Even if I thought it was a comma, I might use parentheses or dashes this time. So let's see. Goldfish can be many different colors. I'm going to use a dash. Various combinations of white, yellow, orange, red, brown, and black. And use special cells called chromatophores to produce pigments in response to light. Now, it doesn't say that in the directions, but I'm also going to highlight this because I think it's going to help you maybe see what the sentence would look like without it. So now I'm going to read it again to see if this sentence actually makes sense. Goldfish can be many different colors and use special cells called chromatophores to produce pigments in response to light. I can take this part of the sentence out and the sentence is absolutely fine. It still has the same meaning, but with it, it gives me a little bit more elaboration on the different colors that could be used. All right, so you're going to pause, do 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then come back to the screencast for your last task. Task 3 says, insert each non-restrictive parenthetical element into the correct sentence. Remember that this will require you to put commas, dashes, or parentheses around them. So you've got 6 sentences here and 6 phrases or clauses, and you're going to kind of have to match which one goes with which sentence. So take a second and read all of them. Read all the sentences, read all of the examples, and I'm going to do this one that says, who is 7 feet tall? This looks like it is describing my uncle. My uncle, who played basketball in college, who is 7 feet tall, played basketball in college. So I could take that out of the sentence. It is not necessary. It doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, but it gives more information and describes the uncle. So it looks kind of like in a positive. This is one of those relative clauses. It starts with who. Okay, and so I highlighted that in yellow, again, just to show that I could take it out of the sentence. All right, and you're going to go do the other 5 sentences, and then make sure that you click Turn In Google Classroom so we get a notification that this task is done. We will not even attempt to grade it unless you turn it in. If you have any questions, ask. And then when you're done with the task, make sure you go to the mastery grid and indicate that you are done with it as well.